Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. Sorry for the mistake, I will correct it. So we start, see if this works. Yes, works. So we are going to start with our lesson. First of all, thank you for the organizer, and thank you also to Tayesunim, because it's because of Tayesunim that we could meet. So this is the first of our 4 lessons on the Four Noble Truths. And the structure is the following. The lesson should not go beyond 1 hour. And after the lesson, there is a session of question and answer. So if you want to ask questions, please wait till the end of the lessons. And for the text that we are going to use in this short course, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is, of course, the main text that we are going to use. This is the locus classicus for the Four Noble Truths. There are many versions of this same story and the exposition of the Four Noble Truths, both in the suttas and the Vinayas, but this is the most commonly known and the most commonly and the most accessible to everybody. So we are going to use this in Samyutta Nikaya 5611. And as for the other texts that we are going to use, we will quote from the Pali Canon in the translation of the Bhikkhu Bodhi, and we will quote some texts from Bhikkhu Nyanananda. There are 2 collections of sermons by Bhikkhu Nyanananda, Nibbana, the mind, still a dependent origination. And then we will make some quotation from this, Concept and Reality. All these books can be downloaded for free as PDF, in PDF format from this website, seeingthroughthenet.net. And we are going to use also some excerpts from the introduction of the Great Discourse on Causation and a short quotation from The Island by Ajahn Pasanno, Ajahn Amaro, which is also available for free as PDF on the web. So speaking about the Four Noble Truths, I want to start by dispelling a misunderstanding about the Four Noble Truths. And that is that they are very often presented as an introduction to Buddhism for beginners. And actually, if you just read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, where the Buddha very explicitly says that he declared to be a Buddha only after having thoroughly understood the Four Noble Truths, this should be enough to dispel this kind of misunderstanding. And if you make a survey on the canon, you will see that the Buddha never starts teaching beginners with the Four Noble Truths. He starts with what? He starts with generosity, a teaching on generosity, teaching on ethics, teaching on the workings of karma, and teaching this kind of teaching. And only when the mind of the listener is mature enough to understand, he goes to the teaching of the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination. The 2 are related. So it's absolutely not a teaching for beginners. Is a teaching that the penetration of the Four Noble Truths marks the transition from a commoner to an Arya. So they are at the core of the Buddhist teachings. And When the Buddha was just conquered enlightenment, he was pretty not very keen to teach people. And why? This is told in the Arapariyesana Sutta, in Majjhima Nikaya 26. We have this sentence. The reason why the Buddha was disinclined to teach is because it is hard for such a generation to see this truth, namely specific conditionality, dependent origination. And it is hard to see this truth, namely the stilling of all formation, the relinquishing of all acquisition, the destruction of craving, dispassion, cessation, nibbana. By specific conditionality, we do not intend the list of the 12 links, but we intend the underlying principle. That is, when this exists, that exists. When this ceases, that ceases. This is specific conditionality. And this principle is at the base of the Four Noble Truths. This is the principle. The Four Noble Truths are an application of these principles. And here you have the stock definition of nirvana with all its synonyms. So we will start, first of all, to read the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta up to the point where the the Buddha speaks about the Four Noble Truths, and then we will explain them. So, thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was dwelling at Varanasi in the Deer Park at Isipatana. There the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus of the group of 5 thus: Bhikkhus, these two extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What two? The pursuit of sensual happiness in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of the worldlings, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has awakened to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. So we have a representation of what is called the middle way. We can speak about middle way with many different nuances of meaning. What is meant here is the middle way between extreme asceticism and extreme indulgence, which the Buddha both had experience of. And what bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision and so on, which leads to nibbana? It is this noble eightfold path, that is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. This bhikkhus is that middle way awakened to by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nibbana. So the middle way is the Noble Eightfold Path, which corresponds to the fourth Noble Truth. And now the exposition of the truth is. Now, this because is the noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering, illness is suffering, death is suffering. Union with what is displeasing is suffering. Separation from what is pleasing is suffering. Not to get what one wants is suffering. In brief, the 5 aggregate subject to clinging are suffering. And please notice the last sentence. In brief, the 5 aggregate subjects to clinging are suffering. What we are going to discuss is basically the meaning of this sentence. Because when we can have an understanding and an insight about the nature of the 5 aggregates, all the rest is just inside this topic. So this is the real meaning of the first noble truth and the way we should conduct our investigation. Now this, because is the noble truth of the origin of suffering. It is this craving which leads to renewed existence accompanied by delight and lust, seeking delight here and there. That is, craving for sensual pleasures, craving for existence, craving for extermination. Now, this because is the station of suffering. It is the remainderless fading away and cessation of that same craving, the giving up and relinquishing of it, freedom from it, non-reliance on it. Now this, because, is the noble truth of the way leading to the cessation of suffering. It is this noble eightfold path that was exposed before. So these are the four noble truths as are classically exposed in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. And now we start with our discussion of this. So, first of all, some general notes about the meaning of Four Noble Truths. There are some suttas that define the term noble. What means noble? What means true? So the term noble is defined in some suttas. The Samyutta from where they come is the same as the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. It's the last Samyutta or Samyutta Nikaya, the Satya Samyutta. So there are three definitions, basically, two from the sutta as one from the commentaries. These four noble truths, bhikkhus, are actual, unerring, not otherwise. Therefore, they are called noble truths. So they are actual. What does it mean, actual? It means that they are not theories. They are real. They are the expression of our experience of reality. So they are not theory on realities. They are not theories on reality. They are real, actual facts about reality, about how we experience reality. So the second, in this world, with these devas, Mara, and Brahma, in this generation, with these ascetics and Brahmis, these devas and humans, the Tathagata is the noble one. This is why they are called noble truths. So because the teacher is a noble one, so this teaching is called noble. And the commentary extend this meaning basically by adding that since these truths are realized by the noble ones, they are called noble. So as you see, it's not a teaching for beginners. These truths can be realized only by the noble ones. That means that the true realization of the Four Noble Truths is what constitutes the gate to enlightenment. So the meaning of Satya, truth. And here we rely on Bhikkhu Bodhi. What he says is he makes a very interesting, sorry, because I cannot see the whole text here. So I go here. So what he says here, can you see the entire screen? Can you see the entire screen?
We can see the invocation. We see the invocation.
No, here is the PowerPoint. Can you see the PowerPoint? Oh, Mito. Yeah, sorry. So most evidently it does not work. Now?
Now we do see the PowerPoint.
Okay, so the alt table doesn't work. It works for me, but not for you. Okay. So you didn't see this. We were discussing about this just a minute ago, and now we discuss about the meaning of Satya. The meaning of Satya. So what is the meaning of Satya? And here we rely on the definition by Bhikkhu Bodhi. In Pali and Sanskrit, this term does not refer to an affirmative statement, but it represents a real condition. So they are facts of life. The Four Noble Truths are not simply statements about life. They are real conditions, actual facts. Therefore, the first Noble Truth is dukkha itself. The second one is craving itself. The third one is nirvana itself. And the fourth one is the path itself. So they are actual as the first sutta that we were quoting before, these Four Noble Truths are actual. They are facts. They are not theories. And this is a general scheme that makes clear the relation between the Four Noble Truths and dependent origination. They are, as I say, the Four Noble Truths are an application of dependent origination, and they speak about the way we produce constantly suffering and the way in which we can go beyond suffering. So we distinguish them into two planes, the samsara and nirvana. And usually the effect is placed before the cause, because the first noble truth of dukkha is the effect of what? Of craving, the second noble truth. And concerning the effect, the nirvana, we have the third noble truth of the cessation of dukkha is the effect of what? Of the application and cultivation of the path. Now, when we say that the third noble truth of is the cessation of dukkha, actually we are not speaking on nirvana itself. And why? Because nirvana is by definition the unconditioned element, so it cannot be the effect of any cause. What the third noble truth is saying is that this term effect applies to the ability of the mind to penetrate the unconditioned element, cultivated through the practice of the Noble Eightfold Path. There is some tendency to say that since since nirvana is unconditioned, we need do nothing to realize it. But in reality, if we do not cultivate the path and we do not cultivate the qualities that allow us to penetrate into the unconditioned element, this experience can never happen. So the path is a conditioned path. And the possibility to really penetrate the nirvana, the unconditioned element, is conditioned. So we start discussing about the first noble truth. Now, just some notes about the term dukkha, or in Sanskrit is dukkha. Now, if you take a dictionary, a Pali or Sanskrit dictionary, this term actually means suffering, sorrow, misery, can be used also as an adjective, unhappy. And so the usual translation that you find everywhere is suffering. And actually, I will use also this kind of translation sometimes just because of convenience, because otherwise the translation becomes too long. But the Buddha took this term and gave it a different meaning, a much more profound and deep meaning. And what is the meaning? Dukkha represents the unsatisfactory nature of all that exists, because all conditional phenomena at the gross or subtle level in any plane of existence are inherently impermanent and selfless, unable to give lasting satisfaction. Dukkha is therefore the outcome of this situation. Now, it's not because phenomena are impermanent that we experience dukkha, because impermanence doesn't hurt anybody. What we experience dukkha not because things are impermanent, but because we want them to be permanent. So, and this, of course, links the first noble truth to the second one. So our experience of dukkha is a mental phenomenon. It's not inherent to the nature of reality. The nature of reality is just what it is. But we experience dukkha because we want things to be otherwise. We want things to be different from what they are. So this is why we experience dukkha, and this is the the deepest meaning of dukkha. And in the sutta, we find three definitions of dukkha, and this is what you find in the Samyutta Nikaya, So someone asks Sariputta, friend Sariputta, it is said, suffering, suffering. What now is suffering? There are, friend, these three kinds of suffering: the suffering due to pain, the suffering due to formations, the suffering due to change. These are the three kinds of suffering. But, friend, is there a path? Is there a way for the full understanding of these three kinds of sufferings? There is a path, friend. There is a way. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. So here we have three kinds of suffering. The suffering due to pain, which is called dukkha dukkhata, the suffering due to formations, sankhara dukkhata, and the suffering due to change, viparinama dukkhata. In the commentaries and in all the following tradition, and this is independent of the tradition you follow, the second two, the second and third one has been reverted. So the usually list is suffering due to pain, suffering due to change, and then suffering due to formation, which is quite logic because the sequence goes from the more superficial one to the more deep, to the deepest level of understanding of dukkha. And so we start to explain what are these three aspects of dukkha. It's always the same dukkha, but it's understood at different levels of death. So dukkha dukkhata is just suffering in the strict sense. The most obvious meaning of suffering. And it is the most evident and obvious case of dukkha. It includes both all kinds of painful bodily sensations due to trauma, disease, etc., whatever you can think about, as well as all forms of mental suffering, from simple sadness to real mental disease. In general, whatever sensation, both bodily and mental, which is obviously painful and distressing, is dukkha dukkhata. So dukkha dukkhata is something that everybody knows. We all suffer in a way or another. We all experience suffering in one way or another in some period of our life. Even animals understand dukkha dukkhata because they do suffer. And this is everybody can agree about this definition. But then there is another definition that goes a little bit deeper in understanding what dukkha is, and this is viparinama dukkhata. Viparinama means change, usually in the bad way, change, and is dissatisfaction due to change. It refers to pleasant feelings because they are subject to change. An experience that we may judge gratifying when it's happening is called a dukkha because it is invariably subject to change. The term viparinama dukkhata applies to a pleasant experience in the moment of its fruition, not when it's already over. So it's a little bit tricky because what we call viparinama dukkhata is the nature of a pleasant experience. So it's called dukkha, not because it's unpleasant, because it's a pleasant feeling, but because it's inherently dissatisfying, is inherently impermanent. It will change. So when a pleasant experience is over, it becomes dukkha dukkhata. It's no more viparinama dukkhata. So viparinama dukkhata is the nature of our pleasant experience in the moment in which we leave it, because we want it to be permanent. And when it inevitably will change, this will bring about real suffering in the sense of dukkha dukkhata. So, for example, we can have a fulfilling life. We can have a beautiful house, whatever, and then things change. Someone may die, and so this beautiful experience is not of the nature of staying forever. And then we have the real deep meaning of dukkha, which is sankhara dukkhata, and there's dissatisfaction inherent to all conditioned phenomena. And this is what Bhikkhu Bodhi says. It is the dissatisfaction that arises due to the fact that all conditional phenomena are subject to constant arising and ceasing. It is strictly connected with what the Buddha calls the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. If you remember, the first noble truth ends with the sentence, in brief, the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are dukkha. And this is what we need to examine to understand exactly what dukkha means. If we contemplate our experience moment after moment, we will see that it is nothing but a combination of the 5 aggregates that arise and cease, arise and cease. Besides these 5 aggregates, there is nothing stable, not a permanent and solid self. They are simply conditions, arising and ceasing phenomena, empty of a substantial nature. The first 2 types of dukkha, dukkha dukkhata and viparinama dukkhata, are understandable to everybody. Dukkha dukkhata is most obvious. Viparinama dukkhata is, to an inquiring mind, it can be quite obvious. That is, even a person that is not Buddhist and is not a philosopher can, but he reflects on life, can understand what viparinama dukkhata is, that everything that is in this world is impermanent. But this kind of meaning, the deepest meaning of dukkha, sankhara, dukkhata, can be understood only by way of deep insight. So is the real insight into the nature of phenomena. As we said, dukkha is the fact, is not a theory. So is the insight into the real nature of our experience. And so we go back to the 5 aggregates. They are impermanent and not self. So now we try to understand what the 5 aggregates subject to clinging are, and in which way do we cling to them, and why we cling to them, because they are the base of our sense of identity. We cannot build up a sense of identity without that. So I think that everybody knows what the 5 aggregates are, but just for a very short summary, the rupa is the material aspect of our experience, and then we have vedana, which is translated usually as feeling. Is not feeling as an emotion, it's just an immediate reaction to the content of experience, so pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And then we have sanya, which is labeling, the recognition of the experience. And then we have the reaction to the content of experience, and which is sankhara. This is the reaction, a conditioned reaction, conditioned by our defilements. So we elaborate volitions on the content of experience, and according to the conditioning that we are taking from previous lives. And then consciousness is what knows all this process. And there is a difference between the 5 aggregates and the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. And this sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, Samyutta 22, the Khanda Samyutta, explains what is the difference. And what, bhikkhus, are the 5 aggregates? Whatever kind of form there is, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is called the form aggregate. And so on for the other aggregates. These bhikkhus are called the 5 aggregates. So what does this mean? The 5 aggregates in and of themselves are just phenomena, just processes, impermanent and devoid of a substance. They're just processes. And what are instead the 5 aggregates subject to clinging? Whatever kind of form there is, whether past, future, or present, and so on, far or near, that is tainted, that can be clung to. This is called the form aggregate subject to clinging, and so on for the other 4 aggregates. So what is the difference between 5 aggregates and 5 aggregates subject to clinging. As I say, the 5 aggregates in and of themselves are just phenomena, but the 5 aggregates subject to clinging instead are the object of our desire, our craving. And we can have clinging for our own 5 aggregates or for the aggregates of other people. So, and we build up an identity based on this kind of clinging. And so this is the difference between the 5 aggregates and the 5 aggregates subject to clinging. And the 5 is the 5 aggregates subject to clinging that are called dukkha, because here what intervenes is the working of our mind in building up our experience. Because the 5 aggregates themselves are not dukkha because they are simply processes, but we don't see them as processes. We see them as identities and substances. So this is the problem. And the relationship between the 5 aggregates and clinging is explained by the Chulavedalla Sutta. The Chulavedalla Sutta, by the way, starts immediately by explaining how we build up the sense of identity based on the 5 aggregates. And so Visakha, which is asking question to Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, ask, lady, is that clinging the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, or is the clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging? Friend Visakha, that clinging is neither the same as these 5 aggregates affected by clinging, nor is clinging something apart from the 5 aggregates affected by clinging. It is the desire and lust in regard to the 5 aggregates affected by clinging that is the clinging here. There is a conditional relationship between our clinging and the 5 aggregates that make through which we build up our experience. And how do we cling to the 5 aggregates so that they become the base for our identity and the base for explaining and for living our experience? It is by what is called conceiving. Now, here we touch into a very deep point of the Dharma and the modality, the way how we build up experience. And because we live in a world of perception, basically, in a world of our perception. So this is the main problem why we cannot come out. It's so difficult to come out because we have to change the way we perceive things. So what we normally do is this conceiving. This note you can find in the Majjhima Nikaya number 1. Majjhima Nikaya number 1 is a very deep sutta, is the Mula Pariyaya Sutta, is the sutta on the root of all things. And what is the root of all things is just the way we perceive and we relate to the content of our knowledge or our cognition, the content of cognition, how the mind relates to the content of cognition. So I quote from Bhikkhu Bodhi. So the Pali verb conceives, manyati, from the root man, to think, is often used in the Pali suttas to mean distortion thinking. So manyati is always a tainted kind of thinking, a thinking that is always based on avidya. Thought that ascribes to its object characteristics and the significance derived not from the object itself, but from one's own subjective imaginings. Now, in a very short sentence, actually, Bhikkhu Bodhi explains how we build up the world of our experience. If you are conversant with the suttas, you will find that the world is not something outside there, but the word for when we speak about the Dharma, the word is our 6 senses, internal, external basis. So what the Buddha speaks about the world is the world of our experience, basically. So what we have to understand is how we build up our experience. And so this is how we understand how we build up dukkha. Because dukkha, as I said at the beginning, is not the result of the fact that the phenomena are impermanent, because impermanence is just the nature of things. But the problem is how we relate to this impermanence, because we want it to be permanent. And this is what Manyati does, the conceiving, the mind takes, so the sentence ascribes to the object characteristic and significance that the object does not have. And this is the work of Sanya. I said Sanya is the perception, is usually translated as perception. But what the mind does when the mind, when an object impinges on the six senses, there is a reaction, Vedana, and immediately there is a recognition, which we call Sanya. But how does the recognition happen? Is that it happens by labeling. The mind has some preconceived patterns, and it's not that is really knowing the object. What is knowing is what it tries to do is to fit the content of cognition to its own patterns. And this is how labeling works. If you nowadays there are some studies on neuroscience that support a little bit this kind of understanding of how the mind works. The mind works by models, preconceived models. Of course, it can create new models, but usually what it does is to take the content of the cognition and to try to fit it into a model. And this is what you call perception. So what we perceive is not exactly the object as it is. What we perceive is something that's built up by the mind. So, which is not saying that it's right or true, right or wrong. It may be completely wrong, but it may also be fit to the environment. Our mind works in that way because it is good for our living, is functional. But it doesn't give us a real picture of how phenomena are. So this is what our mind normally does. So the cognitive distortion introduced by conceiving consists, in brief, in the intrusion of egocentric perspective into the experience already slightly distorted by spontaneous perceptions. According to the commentaries, the activity of conceiving is governed by three defilements, which account for the different ways it comes to manifestation: craving, tanha, conceit, mana, and view. So these are the basic defilements that constitute what we call mental proliferation. It's the manifestation of the intrusion of the self into any instant of cognition. There cannot be an instant of cognition of an unenlightened person that is not tainted by this defilement, this basic defilement. And we have this scheme here. So this working is very often summarized by a sentence that you find quite often in many suttas: etam mama esohamasmi esomeatta, which represents exactly the working of these three basic defilements: craving, conceit, and views. So craving is the appropriation. This is mine. So we have a self, there is a sense of self, and then this self appropriates things. This is mine. Conceit is the notion of self. Is this basic, as I can say, a pre-rational feeling, a notion of the self. This I am. This I do exist. I do exist. So this is what is called a conceit. Views are DT are instead an explanation of what the self is. So our mind always works in this way, because this sense of self is something that seems to be very, very real, very, very real. And so conceiving is done, there is a scheme of 4 kinds of conceiving. Bhikkhu Bodhi points out to the fact that, of course, they do not exhaust all the possible ways, but there are 3 basic ways of our mind elaborates and organizes the data and thinks about the relationship with itself and the data of cognition. So the 4 ways of conceiving Manjana, the Buddha shows that the conceiving of any object may occur in any of 4 ways, expressed by the text as a 4-fold linguistic pattern: accusative, locative, ablative, and appropriative. Now, I don't know if you have any idea of how these languages, Sanskrit, Pali, or Latin, are done. So I don't know how Finnish is, so I have no idea. But in these languages, inflected languages, the function of a noun in the sentence is indicated by cases. So the accusative is the object, the direct object. Locative is by, of course, the place. Ablative is the case of the origin, comes from something, origin. And appropriative is the genitive, is the possessive. I hold it. So there is a direct relationship between the way we build up reality and the way we use language. So the primary significance of this modal pattern, enigmatic in the Pali as well, seems to be ontological. So it is, if you read the Mulapariyaya Sutta, you find a little bit a different wording for the 4 conceiving. So Bhikkhu Bodhi himself says that it is a little bit difficult to understand. I take that pattern to represent the diverse ways in which the ordinary person attempts to give positive being to its imagined sense of egohood by positing below the threshold of reflection a relationship between himself as the subject of cognition and the perceived object, phenomenon as its object. So we have this split between a self that knows reality, knows phenomena, and the phenomena that are known. So a self, an object. And this is a normal pattern, is not reasoning, it's just the way our mind works. According to the 4-fold pattern given, this relationship may be one either of direct identification, if conceives X, or inherence, it conceives in X, or of contrast or derivation, it conceives from X, or of simple appropriation, it conceives X to be mine. So you have this pattern. So, and you can find this pattern not only in the Mulapariyaya Sutta, but if you have the chance to read, for example, the Mahanidana Sutta, you can find this pattern repeated again and again. So now X is whatever you can think about, the 5 aggregates, or the 4 basic elements, or even abstract concept like God. For example, I belong to God, for example, the number 2. X may be whatever, and you have a list of all the concepts that can be put into X in the Mulapariyaya Sutta. So the normal way of the wording of the person that is not enlightened to perceive reality is to try to make a relationship between himself as the subject of perception and the object of perception. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, in his book, The Great Discourse on Causation, explains in a very nice and clear way what is the mechanism behind the construction of the sense of identity based on the five aggregates. So we conceive the five aggregates in this kind of distorted way. And this is the clinging we are talking about. So Bhikkhu Bodhi make some paragraph. This is consideration of self. There are two paragraphs, consideration of self and description of self. And consideration of self are more basic. There are this notion of self. And the description of self are the theories that explain what our self is. So their basic function, the function of the consideration of self, is to substantiate the idea of self by relating it to the given content of experience. For this reason, the consideration of self are far more widespread than the description. Few try to work out systematic views about the self, but almost everyone, whether commoner or philosopher, cherishes some notion about what is beneath his names and forms. This notion, that notion, is his consideration of self. So everybody has this. When I say I immediately have a sort of feeling inside, as a sort of. It seems very clear what I means, and this is the consideration of self, the notion behind. But not necessarily. I do not necessarily elaborate a theory about the self, which would be the description itself. The problem of finding some identity for the self arises because the worldling continually conceives his experience through the filter of the notion I am. This notion, called a conceit, mana, a desire, chanda, an underlying tendency, anusaya, but not a view, is not a view. A view is an explanation about the self, but this is much more basic, much more primordial. Arises spontaneously in his mind to do the basic ignorance because avidya, that we have this sense of self, and avidya manifests itself in this sense of a core to which all experience pertains. The worldling accepts the idea I am as indicating what it seems to indicate itself. Self is the notion of a truly existent I, an I which is not a mere referential designation, but an enduring center of personal identity. The worldling embraces this idea of self as an overwhelming certainty. At the same time, however, it remains for him an enigma. Self is his identity, what he really is at the core of his being, yet it never reveals its own identity freely and openly to direct cognition. Its identity is always something that has to be figured out, squeezed out of the data of deduction and inference, not something clearly self-manifesting. So there is an exercise that is preliminary to the contemplation of emptiness that is used in some schools, Tibetan schools, for example, the Gelugpa school. This propedeutic exercise consists in evoking this sense of self, first of all. So one must evoke the sense of self, have a very clear feeling, a very clear notion of what the self is, and then start to analyze. And then start to analyze it. If we keep to the conventional level without analysis, this notion of self seems to be very, very clear and very, very obvious. But in the moment we start to analyze, we start to search for its nature. What is it? We never find an answer. It's impossible to find an answer. And so this opened the way to the deeper exercise of meditation of emptiness. However, since the worldling finds the idea of self unimpeachable, he feels it must have some identity, And thus, without quite being aware that he's doing so, he proceeds to give it one. To provide the self with an identity, he must make use of the material available to him for consideration, and that is the five aggregates. And so we come back to the five aggregates, which are the base for giving this sense of self, this notion of self, suffering. And so this is the deepest meaning that we need to understand really what the First Noble Truth is all about. Because when we speak about the self, usually the immediate notion that comes to mind, and this is not a question of reasoning, but the kind of experience we have of the self is something that is independent, is unconditioned, is never changing. But the five aggregates fall short to fulfill this characteristic. They are conditioned. They are constantly changing. So they never satisfy our urge to become what is known as our identity. But we constantly cling to them because our mind cannot do otherwise. So we have to we need the process of cultivation of the mind to change how we perceive things. And this is the deepest meaning, what we have to understand about the First Noble Truth. So all these notions have to slowly become something like an insight. Okay, for today, our lesson ends here. And if you have any questions, if there are no questions, we can go back to this. Can you see it? Invocation of yeah. So it doesn't, the Alt tab doesn't work really. I have to close the screen and open it again. Okay. If there are no questions, we can.
Do you want to say something, Vimala Mitra?
Yeah, please.
I think we can open the screens, monitors. Yes, please. Everybody can open that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Any questions?
Well, I have one question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So yeah, there was a lot to understand there. Thank you. It was great talk. But I was wondering, so if the
I cannot hear very clearly. Sorry.
Oh. Let me try to change some. Is it better now?
It seems to be, yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering if our consciousness arises from whatever our senses, whatever information we get from our senses, and then our cognition then puts those into some models that we already have in our brain, in our mind. So and then that is what creates the dukkha for us, the suffering. So is then like what is the way to then change that? Is the path, the Noble Eightfold Path, then the way to like rewire our own brains so that whatever our senses receive, we then have different kind of models in our brains that our cognition puts all the information into, or because if there is no separate self, then how can we change that?
Oh, actually, the Buddha gives us the way of doing things, the instruments of rewiring the mind, and that is Satipatthana, the contemplation of impermanence. Usually, I don't know if you know that sutta is called the Girimananda Sutta. It's Anguttara Nikaya, Book of 10. It should be the 61, I think. It gives 10 perceptions. What means that it gives 10 perception? It gives 10 exercise, 10 objects of contemplation by which we are exhorted to contemplate reality in a different way. Because with Satipatthana, what do you do? What are we doing with Satipatthana? We are basically changing the way our mind perceives objects. So the cultivation process is a process of education in perception. Instead of perceiving phenomena as solid and permanent, we start to perceive that as impermanent, and this does work. If you take the habit of perceiving things, of course, you need what is called a sati. Satipatthana is the cultivation of sati. If you use sati and you just direct your mind to perceive things not in an obvious way, but in a different way, it will slowly work. It's not immediate, of course. And this is a process, the process of cultivation of the mind. And this is what is done by cultivation of impermanence. Usually impermanence is the most obvious thing where to start. Also, of the three characteristics, impermanence, not self, and dukkha, all can be okay, but usually the majority of people has more, for the majority of people, it's easier to start with impermanence. It's more immediate, most easy. And when you start to penetrate a little bit into the meaning of impermanence, not the theoretical meaning of impermanence, but to see that the object of your perception are not what corresponds to the name you give to them. And that something starts to change in them. And it does work. It does work. This is the instrument you use to change perception. At a certain point, you will see, if the meditation goes on, you can see that there is a gap between the name you give to object and the object itself. There is not there's not anymore an immediate correspondence. And then at the point the mind there is a certain level of bewilderment of the mind, because this is not the way it usually wants reality to be. But this is the way of doing it. If you do it repeatedly, at a certain point, impermanence is the starting point, and then impermanence flows into the perception of non-self. Because if something is impermanent, is obviously not stable. There is nothing substantial there. It's continually changing. So the perception of impermanence flows into the perception of non-self. And this is done by cultivating Satipatthana, or all the methods that... Satipatthana is a very broad and very complete program for mind rewandering. The reprogramming of the mind is a very complete program. And of course, into Satipatthana, you put all the rest. We develop with Satipatthana, we develop all the 7 factors of enlightenment and so on. So our mind simply starts to perceive reality in a different way. to perceive impermanence where before it was perceiving permanence, and so on. And of course, the real change comes with the real deep insight. Of course, at our level, there can be a slow progression, but of course, the real change happens with deep insight. I don't know if this answers your question.
Yeah, that was, thank you. That was a very good and good answer, and I'm very glad that there is a sutta with tangible exercises that can be done, because I tend to. It is very hard to rewire the brain to understand the.
Sure. Sure.
So
otherwise we would be all enlightened.
yes, of
We're
course.
very easy.
Yes, thank you very much.
But it's not easy. Yes, to become a Buddha is not easy. Even to become an Arhat is not easy. Even to get the first fruit is not easy, because it means that you just leave behind all what you have given for granted, and is a sort of, even the first fruit is just a revolution. It is a complete revolution, because you just change complete perspective. It's an immediate change of perspective from a mind that is always working on the base of duality, from a mind that understands that all this is just an illusion. It's just a complete turning point. So to bring about that is not easy at all. Of course, it's not easy at all. But we can have some, as I can say, some flavor of it if we go on practicing. There can be some instance of a deeper understanding that, of course, we are not enlightened, so these instances are just a little opening and then immediately close down. But it does make something to the mind. It does change the mind, how the mind works and how the mind sees reality. Other questions? If there are no other questions, we can close with our transference of merits. So you can see the screen. Can you see the screen? Is okay? Okay. So this is transference of merits. We share all the merits we have just accumulated with all sentient beings, so that they can realize the perfection of wisdom and be free from any suffering. Homage to the Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the Buddha Shakyamuni. Okay, thank you for your participation, and we will meet again in 1 week. Bye bye.